Hey, and welcome everybody. It's the SEO Experience with Chris Doughty. Got a great guest today, which I think many of you will know, which is really interesting. He is a really good friend of mine, known him for a long, long time, and just so insightful, a lot of knowledge. And so we're just going to have a casual conversation today, nothing too structured, and we'll go through it all. So without further ado, I'll bring in Pip. Hey, Pip. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Chris? How you doing?
I'm good, yeah. So I've just sort of given a nice little intro to sort of say, we're good friends. I've known you for a long time, and although we're two sides of a pond, we catch up quite a bit, and have a little conversation now and again, see what's going on. So what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, my guess is you're just running out of guests to bring on to your show, so that's why you invited me. Because now we're kind of 3 months into this COVID thing, and you're like, I need new people, and you're like, I don't have anybody else, so I'm gonna reach to the bottom of the barrel. I'm gonna get Pip. I'm guessing that's what happened. Is that right, Chris?
It's something like you nailed it on the head. You know how that works.
Yeah, I know. See, if I'd have been important, I'd have been on like the April 1 show or something. I get it. It's okay. You're running out of people.
Or Ellen, or something like that.
Something like that.
So we're having a bit of fun.
That's too fun. Well, I'm gonna have a good time. Like I always say, I'm gonna have a good time whether y'all do or not. And I probably have a different accent than most of the people on here. I've got the right accent. Many of you have the wrong accent. And I know Chris is going, he's already smacking my audience before we get started. Well, that's just who I am. And I have a lot of fun doing what I do. So, yeah, I live in Kansas City, Missouri. When I say Kansas City, people are like, Kansas? Well, there's a Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri. They're right across the Missouri River from one another. If you know anything about U.S. geography, first of all, Kansas City, Missouri is way more populated than Kansas City, Kansas. And secondly, if you don't know anything about U.S. geography, we're right in the middle of the country. So we're in Tornado Alley. If you've watched The Wizard of Oz, Kansas is where the tornado came through. And so, yeah, we live in Tornado Alley. However, I've lived in this area for 52 years of my life now, and very seldom do you see a tornado. But that's always the question that people have. But, yeah. So as of right now, and I'm sure Chris and I are going to talk a lot about this, is just what's going on in the world with the COVID situations and things like that. Done a lot of different properties. I was started in investing back in 2002. So did it through a couple of different recessions. I will talk more about this, but I believe there'll be another recession coming up here with all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
The nice part about it, whether it was 2002, 2009, or 8, whatever time you want to look at it, there's huge buying opportunities. So I've been sitting and watching this and going, there's going to be a great opportunity. And so I think there's opportunities there, no matter whether it's an up market, down market, or a sideways market. Most importantly, though, you learn from everything that you do. And so, like I said, I started in real estate in 2002. My wife and I bought our first house actually in 1999. And so, but that wasn't as an investor. It was just our own personal residence. Grew up in a family-owned business. Did stand-up comedy for a number of years.
Yeah,
so,
we're gonna talk about that. So you're not gonna get past that. We're gonna talk about that in a bit because that's amazing. I love that.
And so anyway, so that I always enjoyed standing in front of groups of people and talking. And I mean, and a lot of my references are U.S. references just because that's where I was born and raised. I remember hearing a guy by the name of Zig Ziglar speaking, and I thought that guy's really cool. And I ended up buying his cassette tapes, and that's how long ago I did this stuff. Was in the 80s. I was thinking it would be cool to be able to be on stages and talking to people, influencing people. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so I always got a lot of got beat up a lot as a kid. That's hence where the name Pip comes from. It was from short for Pip Squeak, and my brothers just knocked me around all the time. And so, I always wanted to try to stand out. The way I could stand out was to make people laugh. The way I could stand out was to, be the class clown mentality, and that's just what I did. And that's kind of the background that I had. But I heard Zig Ziglar talk, and I thought that'd be interesting to be able to do that. Then I heard 2 other people. And this is a story I've shared many times over the years. It goes all the way back to 1980, probably before many of you on the call were even born. But and now, forgive me on the person I'm going to talk about because he's now gone through a lot of issues. But I got to hear my first stand-up comedian in person was a guy by the name of Bill Cosby that you all know. Everybody knows him. This was before the Cosby Show in the 80s. It was 1980. He had done Fat Albert, some other stuff, and he was a nationally known stand-up comedian. I got to hear him speak, or do his act. And I thought, hey, I want to do that someday. Well, the following morning, we happened to be at a grocery store convention in Chicago. My dad was in the grocery business. I'm 13 years old. Don't really have any desire to be at a grocery store convention, but I got to hear Bill Cosby, which is cool. And the following morning, I got to hear a college football coach. Probably two people on this call may even know who I'm talking about. You can look him up. His name is Lou Holtz. He had just won a national championship at the college ranks in the United States, which is huge. And he got to speak, and he spoke for about 30, maybe 45 minutes. And he was a motivational speaker, and that's all he was motivational. And I thought, is there a way, after listening to him speak, I'm like, man, if I could just, learn what he did and be able to replicate that and then bring in the Bill Cosby comedy kind of stuff, I think that would be really cool. And so that was my dream at the age of 13, was how could I become comedian, motivational, all these kinds of things. I had no idea how it was going to work. And so I know, Chris, we talk a lot about traditional education. I've got plenty of traditional education. I got an undergrad degree in business. I have a master's or an MBA. I think you guys have this. You have the same degree in the UK. I'm assuming it's the same, but it's a master's in business administration. You may call it something different. I've got an MBA, so I got plenty of traditional education. And I got done with my MBA, and I went out and I started doing stand-up comedy. And so a lot of times you don't see guys with master's degrees going out on stages trying to make 100 people in a Smoky Comedy Club laugh. And I know you guys doing Smoky. Well, back in 1992, they were still smoking in all the comedy clubs. So that was just a little different world back then. And so I did that for about 7 years. And I knew at that point I wasn't going to become a gabillionaire doing stand-up comedy, but I did learn a whole lot about communications. And whether people know it or not, I learned a lot about sales, because a good comedian is selling every 20 seconds. They're selling a thought, an idea, of whatever you want to call it, to make somebody laugh. An opinion, it could even be. And if you can sell somebody an opinion in 20 seconds and make them laugh, that is really a sales skill that most people don't even think about. And so I ended up getting married in 1999 and went back to work at the family-owned grocery business. Had no desire to be there, but I thought, you know what? I need to learn how to make some money, because if I want to be motivational in my speaking, I got to have some credibility. I can't just be funny up on a motivational stage. I gotta literally make some money. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to help build the biggest grocery store, chain, family-owned chain in the area. Well, if you don't know anything about the United States, Walmart is a big competitor, and they were just knocking all the independent grocers out of the place. And in 1999, I got back in the grocery business, and by 2002, I was looking for other things to do, because I'm thinking this is going to be a long road to try to compete against somebody like Walmart with pockets as deep as they have.
Yeah.
And so in 2002, my brother and I were looking for opportunities. We saw that there was a Zig Ziglar presentation coming to Omaha, Nebraska. I lived in Nebraska for the first 40 years of my life, but it's really only an hour and a half away from where I'm at right now. Anyway, so we went to the Zig Ziglar presentation, and at that presentation, there was a gentleman talking about real estate, and there was a whole bunch of other speakers. People were talking about stock and different things like that. And so this guy came up and talked about real estate investing. Chris, do you know a guy by the name of James Smith? If you don't, okay, I don't know if you, a very common name. He's been in this arena for, I'm thinking probably, I think he might have babysat Jesus. That's how long ago he's been around. So he's been around a long time. Anyway, so James Smith was this trainer, and I'm like, I like what this guy has to say. So I enrolled in some training, went to some more training, bought more training, and started becoming the best real estate investor I could. Because I knew that if I could get into real estate, there were some advantages that I had. I could move quicker than the big guys. I could make decisions quicker than the big guys. And I could still leverage property as an individual. Because technically, most of the time, the lenders are not lending you the money and your idea. They're looking at the property. They're looking at the real estate and going, is there a value there that if Pip Stehlik doesn't pay me back, are they okay lending at a rate, whether it's 60%, 70%, 80% of the value of the property? The other thing I liked about real estate was there's multiple ways to make money, but and cash flow is obviously king, and that's what I like to invest for. But the coolest part about real estate is you can basically increase value 3 different ways. If I bought gold, if I bought stock, if I buy anything like that, the only way I can increase value is if it goes up in value. That is the only way, because whatever Apple stock is selling for today, whatever Microsoft stock is selling for today, we may think it's at a discount, but it's the same price that everybody else on this call can get Microsoft stock for. However, if there's a piece of property, or real estate as we call it here, if there's a piece of property, if I have great negotiation skills, if I make enough offers, I'm going to get properties at discounts. And so I can go in and make money in the buy, as we call it in this business. So I can make money in the buy immediately.
Yeah.
And that's one way I can make money in property. Well, the second way I can make money in property is just like you would with stocks or real estate or gold. It goes up in value over time. Does it always go up? No. Does gold always go up? No. But over time, many things go up in value if you hold it long enough. And the third way that I can make money in property is forcing the appreciation or adding value. I think Chris and I talked about this before. You add value to it. And I might be able to force the appreciation by changing the property by renovating it, refurbishing, I think is what you guys use as that term in the UK, and just fixing it up and increasing value. Forced appreciation is what we call that in the US. But I can also change the usage of it. I consider this the same concept of adding value. I can take it from a property that may be a single family house and change it into a multi-family building. You guys call it HMOs, right? Houses of multiple occupancy.
You got it.
I mean, we call it social housing here in the United States. It all mean the exact same thing. But what it means for all of us is that we can increase the value of property two more ways than we can with buying any other type of asset. So I got into property in 2002, Chris, and started buying as many properties as we could. We bought a whole bunch of properties. And then in 2005, the people that trained me asked me to come on and start mentoring other people one-on-one. So I did that for about a year and a half. But here was the whole key. When I sat in that class back in 2002, I said, how can I be the guy at the front of the stage?
Yeah.
How can I be that guy? The first thing I said, well, I got to be the best real estate investor I can possibly be. So I have a portfolio of properties. So that's what I did. Bought a bunch of properties, had a whole portfolio. And that was 2002. By 2005, they asked me, they said, would you like to come on and mentor students one-on-one? And Chris, I opened, and I know you've mentored many students over the years, but I openly told the guy, I said, I don't want to mentor anybody. He goes, what? He goes, we've really never been turned down. And I said, well, I don't really want to teach people one-on-one. I said, what I'd like to do is I like to teach people in groups. I said, my wife tells me I talk better in front of 60 people than I do one-on-one. Now, I don't think that's a compliment coming from my wife, Chris, but nonetheless, that's what she says. She also says I look better in the dark. I don't think that's a compliment either. But anyway,
I think a lot of wives say that bit.
Okay, just saying, making sure. I know your wife would say that. And so the point being is, I said to these guys, I don't really want to mentor. They said, well, if you want to, I go, they go, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a trainer. I want to teach people, on bigger stages. And they said, well, if you mentor for 18 months, show that you can do that. If you want to start training at that point on a bigger stage, we'll talk about it then. So I like to use a guy's terminology that I read all his books, and I'm sure many of you guys have read books from a guy by the name of Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And Kiyosaki always uses this term. He says, work to learn. Don't work for money, work to learn. And so I learned how to teach people one-on-one. And what that did is it then gave me the opportunity to have a stage to teach people in bigger venues. And so from 2007 to basically when COVID came around in March of this year, I've been on stages in all across the United States, 18 different countries of the world, and had the opportunity to help people go from where they're at to where they want to be. And that technically is the whole thing. And you'll probably hear me say this multiple times as we go through this, Chris. You've heard me say it every time you've heard me teach is, if you help enough other people get what they want, you get what you want. And that's a Zig Ziglar term that I heard when I was probably 13 or 14 years old on a cassette tape. So that's a little bit of my background as far as what we're doing now. And I know that's always the question, and we'll talk more about this.
Yeah.
But we've done all kinds of different strategies, renovations or refurbishments, commercial property, social housing, buy and hold type of strategies, just rental properties. But then we do something called lease option or rent to own, maybe the terminology.
Yeah.
And the nice part about rent to own is it works no matter what's going on in the market, because we're looking for two facets. We're looking for people who can't quite qualify to buy a property. We're looking for people who are having problems selling their properties. So those are going to be there in either market. In an up market, there's always people that can't find a property because income isn't enough, credit situation isn't good enough, they're self-employed, so they're not showing income. So that works great in an up market. In a down market, people can't sell their properties. So we could come in and buy with the lease option, just like we can sell with the lease option in a hot market. So we kind of marry those two strategies up to do a lot of different things. So we do a lot of that. The second thing, the other two things that I really focused on in the company that I have partners in this as well. We've really focused in the last 3 months on two things that we used to do old school, but we haven't. We kind of took our eye off the ball because the market conditions have really changed. Was in the United States, we have what's called Section 8 housing. And Section 8 housing is a government sponsored program where, and you guys have it in the UK as well, that the government makes the payment every month for the tenant. And it's all subsidized housing. And the nice part about that in April and May, when in the United States, and I'm sure you've had some of this in the UK, a lot of tenants didn't pay rent because of being out of jobs and things like that. The government still paid the rent. And so that's a great, and in June as well, because now we're in the middle of June. The payments come on time no matter what. And so Section 8 housing or social housing in the United States is a very big benefit in a market like this because the rent's guaranteed. The other strategy, and Chris will laugh when I say this, goes really old school. It's back to the way a lot of investors started because they don't have any money, they don't have any credit, they don't have a lot of knowledge. In the UK, you call it sourcing properties. In the US, we call it wholesaling.
Yeah.
And so we'll find properties and assign a contract for a profit. And we're back to doing that just because the main reason, and this is me being probably a little bit overthinking it, is that I think we're at the peak of a market right now. And in the peak of the market, you don't want to be buying for appreciation. You don't want to be rehabbing or renovating or refurbishing as much as because you don't know where you're at in that cycle always.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a refurbishment. You bought it on June 15th at this level, at the highest level. You try to refurbish it and sell it up to here. Well, unfortunately, you refurbish it, but the whole market tanks on you. And now no matter how much you put into the property, it still isn't worth what you paid for it. So we're really back to old school stuff. And I guess it's the fundamentals. It's kind of like if you're into any type of sports of any kind, the best teams have the best fundamentals. And I think that's really what it always should come back to. Whether you're a basketball fan or a soccer or sport or football fan, it's all about the fundamentals. And if you have solid fundamentals and you can play good defense and you can play good offense, you're going to win a lot of games. So like I said, Chris, I could probably talk for 3 hours. Chris is going, I haven't even gotten a word in, and he's been talking for like 20 minutes. Chris is going, that never happens. Chris and I are always trying to steal the mic from one another. So,
to be honest,
what do you got, buddy?
To be honest, it's a pleasure, Pip, because normally it's everybody moaning at me for talking too much. So in actual fact, it's a pleasure. But I guess I've got a few questions off the back of that. And again, just what you described there, mate, is your journey, which obviously, you're very proud to stand up and put your heart on your sleeve and tell people about, etc. And again, for me, this is a fundamental in anybody in this business where, and I'm definitely the same, where I know that I couldn't stand in front of people or mentor people or if I hadn't done it, because you can tell straight away if that person, and it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Does that make sense? A lot of the time, which gives the keys away. And for me, I think there's so many people in this game, in this sector, in this industry who unfortunately see the opportunity of being able to talk about it, but actual fact they've not really done it themselves because either they're a guru, they're a training guru, whatever. And I just, I think, just from my own personal opinion, I think there's not enough people who have actually done it who are then actually talking with newcomers to the market. And I think as an individual, you can tell. You can actually tell. Now, whether you listen to yourself, does that make sense? Or the little voice in the back of the head going, this doesn't add up. 2 + 2 is not equaling 4. And I from my perspective, there's not enough genuine people out there. And unfortunately, I think from a lot of people's perspective, you can't really find that out. There's no easy way of finding. If somebody says, I've got, 100 million under management or whatever it may be, well, my question is, well, why are you stood here? Do you know what I mean? Why are you stood here telling me about it? And what's your thoughts on sort of that angle of people wanting to get in, but not, being able to decipher who's legit, who's not? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I have lots of thoughts on that. I mean, obviously, I've been on both sides of this. I'm technically not that much of an analytical guy. My wife is way more analytical. The brothers that I invest with are very analytical. So being analytical is not probably my strong suit.
Yeah,
I'm more the guy that wants to just go out and have fun, type of mentality. And so, you know, and they always say the devil's in the details. Well, the one thing, if I can give you, is, from basically 18 years of experience being an investor, but 13 years being on stages talking to people. And I've talked to groups as little as 10 people, 12 people, I guess, is the smallest group I've talked to. I mean,
yeah,
you also teach one-on-one, don't get me wrong. But as far as a presentation, most of my presentations, I've done 2-hour presentations, and I've done 3-day presentations. The majority of my stuff has been 3-day training presentations.
yeah,
But in those training presentations, and I know Chris has been to them. I'm sure many of you guys on the webinar today have been on these, or maybe you're going to be going to these. And most of those 3-day presentations, the 2-hour presentations are, I would say, 99% of the time, a sales pitch
yeah,
to go to another presentation. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't think sales is a dirty word. We're all in sales. If you're married, if you have a significant other, you had to sell something to get in that relationship. So we're all selling every day.
If you got kids, you're selling to the kids to get them to do stuff, right?
I don't know how many times I'll have teachers that I'm teaching and they're like, well, I don't want to be in sales. I'm like, you're a teacher, for heaven's sake. You're in sales no matter if you're teaching kindergarten or if you're teaching college level kids.
Yeah,
You're in sales. And so the point being is, don't think sales is a bad or a dirty word. It's okay. Now, you have the right to purchase something or not purchase something every time you're making those decisions. And you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And
yeah,
so those are some things I would look for as a customer. I did a lot of 3-day presentations, and I think one of the biggest compliments I ever got, and I got this from students, I've got it from people that I worked with. And, generally when you're a speaker, you have people that work in the back of the room with you.
yeah,
And, I've worked with hundreds of different people in the back of the room. I can't say thousands. I don't think it's been thousands, definitely hundreds of different people. And one of the comments I always got from people was, they would say, Pip, and my presentation is usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And generally on Sunday, people make a decision to do more training if they want to do it. And that's just how the process works. And these training packages can cost anywhere from $1,500 all the way up to $60,000.
yeah,
And so, I mean, these are just the ranges. And so the one comment or compliment that I think I got more than anything was like, Pip, I appreciate the fact that your presentation doesn't change on Sunday. And I had to ask them, I'm going, what do you mean? And they go, well, if you watch a lot of presenters on Sunday, there becomes a lot of urgency, and you can just feel the sales pressure go up because people aren't buying training packages, and they're freaking out and they're fretting about it a little bit. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got to get, a certain percentage closed, or I've got to get this number or that number. Well, I think when you start seeing a presenter start feeling, and you can feel it in an audience, somebody being stressed by people not going to the back of the room or people not raising their hand for this or that. I think
yeah,
you just got to be aware of those things. Instead of thinking about your decision, sometimes look and see what other people are doing. Look and see what this presenter is doing to feel, are they really trying to, make you buy something right now? I mean, I truly believe the people that take action sooner rather than later tend to probably be more successful in real estate. Because part of the process of real estate is being able to make a decision on a property. The two things, though, or the one thing I think is most important about whether you're, doing an education or you're buying a property is you're in a contractual obligation there, but you always have what I call outs or exit clauses.
yeah,
And so if I'm making an offer on whether it's a $100,000 property or $1 million property, I've got control of the contract, which means I can get out, whether it's based on an inspection, whether it's based on a lot of different things that we can put into the contract. I don't know that there's any education company out there. I don't know that there's anybody, worldwide. I don't know the laws in every country, obviously, but if you're buying education, you're putting your name on a contract, which means they have a duty to fulfill it. You have the duty to pay for it. But there's outs on those contracts as well. And you just got to read those things and make sure that you have those outs. Chris, you're going to laugh. I was on a webinar last night, And I signed up. I was on this guy's webinar, and I'm like, this guy's got a good product. I'm signing up for some more training with him, and I did that. But what did I do? I asked a couple of things. The first question I asked was, is there an ability to get out if I need to, if I want to, out of the contract? And he emails the contract to us, and there's obviously exits on there. And the second question that I always ask, and this is something I know Chris and I have talked about, and this will tell you the salespeople from the actual investors that are selling you stuff, is the word support. And if I could go back and change anything in my life, is I would create a company called Support Real Estate or something like that. And only because I still have students that I taught 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago that still ask me questions because my email hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I mean, and I have no problem answering those questions. And the funny part about it is the students, or those customers, as I call them, they feel more guilty for asking me a question because, like, I'm bothering you. No, you're not bothering me. I told you when I stood in front of you. I shook your hand. Now I guess I can't shake any hands. I bumped elbows.
Why is that, Pip? Because that's something that's a bit of a bugbear from my perspective as well. And we've taken a stance, from my perspective, doing long-term support, like a year.
Yeah.
And when I say it, that's a contractual obligation, but like, I've shown it to many people before where, I'm dealing with, mentees of mine from 5 years ago, who flew into, London. We're going to have a burger. It turns out he wants to restructure his portfolio, and let's have a discussion. Now, what I don't understand though is why do people? Is it an embarrassment thing? Because we turn around and we go, it's here. It's an open door policy. We're here as a support mechanism to allow you to go to the next steps or whatever you want to do. But I would turn around and say 90% of people don't take it. Why? Why don't they?
Maybe it's an ego or embarrassment thing that you just said. I mean, there are people that purchase education and don't do anything with it. Before I became a trainer, I mentored students one-on-one, and I'll never forget. I went out and mentored this couple, and they were probably in their 50s at the time. And they had been taking class after class after class, had bought, I believe at the time, and we're talking, 15 years ago, 2005, 2006, $45,000, $50,000 worth of education, which, that's their money. They can do whatever they want to with it. And and that's great if that's what they want to do. And I get there to mentor them. And we had talked on the phone a few times ahead of times, and I knew that they hadn't bought a single property in that year and a half span that they've been getting educated. And so I asked them the question is, what's going on? What's wrong? Have you not enjoyed the trainings that you're taking? They're like, oh, the trainings have been awesome. I'm like, okay. Yeah. I said, well, then can I ask, why haven't you put any of it to practice? And they said, well, we just did the training more for personal development rather than to make money. And that literally floored me, is because I couldn't financially afford to do it that way. I didn't have a lot of money. My wife and I, we were just getting by when I sat in a class years ago. So it wasn't like we had extra money. I didn't have any big debts, but I didn't have any savings, or in the US, a 401k. I didn't have any of that stuff. And so, we put everything on credit to be able to get trained. And like, I was going to be, I'd be darned if I wasn't going to do everything I possibly could to be successful. So sometimes I think the unfortunate thing, no matter whether it's $10,000, $50,000, it isn't a big enough pain for that person to want to go out and do the work. I think we do things for one of two reasons: either pain, or for lack of pain, or for financial gain or profit, whatever word you want to use. And if it doesn't hurt enough, you're not going to do what you need to do, because there's work involved. And I know, Chris, you never tell anybody that there's no work involved. There's a lot of work. You can have people like Chris who do a lot of the heavy lifting to help find properties, to help source money and things like that. And that's why you go, you work with a company like Chris, because sourcing investments, they're finding deals for you. They're helping you find the money to do that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of benefits to have that type of person. They're going to give you a lot of, first steps. They're also going to make the steps a lot easier. And so the problem is, though, if it doesn't hurt a little bit, I don't think you do the work that you need to. And so putting money out there, having some financial hurt, is going to make you want to do the work, either to get the money back or to make a return or quit your job. If you love your job and you think your retirement's going to be set and you got just gads of money, then maybe you are going to be very successful at this. You got to have a want to. I always tell students, you bring the desire, I'll bring the support. But if you don't bring the desire, there's no amount of a support that I can give you that's going to help you. And so I think there's got to be a want to, but I also think there's an embarrassment mentality. I mean, they hear a guy like Chris or a guy like Pip that went out and did a bunch of properties in a short period of time, and you're like, man, I want to do that. And so you get all pumped up and you get excited, and you realize when you get out there, it's tougher than you think. And you let time go by, and you don't ask questions, you don't use the support mechanisms that are in place, and then you're almost like, well, now I'm embarrassed to ask. Don't ever be embarrassed, especially if you invest in money with somebody to go get that. I mean, if you bought a car from somebody and it wasn't working, you go back, you take it back to the dealership, you take it to the mechanic and say, hey, what's going on? And so I think you got to look at it that way. Don't ever be embarrassed. If you've invested time, money, effort into something, you've invested and you want to get a return on that. Now, if you don't do the work, obviously we can't help somebody that doesn't want to do the work or put out the effort. So the support can only be there for somebody who has a desire. But the main thing is, and Chris, just made the comment, you've got students that you mentored 15 or 5 years ago. I've got students that I mentored 10, 15 years ago that even though they don't ask me a lot of questions, if they're doing something new, they're going to say, hey, Pip, can I get your opinion on this? And so that's a nice thing. I just got a Facebook message from a student that I met in 2009 in Ottawa, Canada. I've taught, like I said, all over the world. And Heather and Asokan, I'm probably missing up his name. It's Askoan or something. Asokan. Anyway, I met these guys 11, 12 years ago in Ottawa, Canada. I haven't talked to them in probably 10 years. They've got all kinds of properties. They've got a property management company. They're knocking it out of the park. I got a Facebook message from them this morning. Said, hey, Pip, I know you probably don't remember us, but we sat in your class in Ottawa. We're now looking to go to the U.S. and do some properties. Is there any way you can help us? I just sent them a text or a Facebook message this morning. Send it to me in an email. We'll get on the phone and we'll talk. I mean, at the end of the day, you love making money, but you also love helping people. And those should go hand in hand. I'm not going to make a dime off of helping these people other than, in my own personal growth as far as a human being. If I help them get one property in the U.S., 11 years, 12 years after I met them, then it was a win for me. Whether I make a dime on that or not, which I won't, it's going to be a huge benefit. And the cool part about it is, I made a comment years ago. I said, I want to live forever. People are like, how do you live forever? The only way to live forever is to be influential on people and the people that they touch. Yeah. So these guys that I met, Heather and Asokan, when I met them 11 years ago, they didn't think that they were going to be calling me 11, 12 years from now and saying, hey, I need help on something else. But the nice part about it is they got kids. And guess what they're going to tell their kids? They're going to say, hey, this guy that helped us 11 or 12 years ago is going to keep helping us. And they're going to tell their kids about that. And guess what? That's going to get passed on. And long after Pip's off this earth, I'm going to be having people talk about me going, hey, that guy, I don't remember his name. He was a great looking guy, but I don't remember his name. He really helped me out. Okay, maybe not so great looking, but that's okay. He had a funny name, but he helped me out. And so I think people that are successful investors, I mean, the guy that I taught, that I bought some training from last night, he's done 30,000 property deals in the last 10, 12 years. And he shows that. So does he need my $5,000? Probably not. But it was totally worth it for me. And here's the problem. If he'd have put a $500 price tag on it, I probably would have said, there's probably not a lot of value here, because he's not going to do it for nothing. So you got to understand that somebody's putting time or value on their time. That's a good thing because they think their product is worth it. If you buy a Chevy versus buying a Lamborghini, you expect to have more service, more bells, more whistles than somebody who's, buys a Chevy. I'm not saying a Chevy can't get you from point A to point B, but if you want a certain lifestyle, if you want a certain ride, you're going to buy a nicer car. So, I mean, at the end of it, it really comes down to, I think you get what you pay for, but you also get what you put into it. And that's got to be your effort. But the support can always be there. And then that's what a guy like Chris and myself have always offered is, we're going to be there to hold your hand because we went through this and we needed help.
Yeah.
You know, most everybody is where they're at because they stood on the shoulders of other people. It's not that they pushed other people down. They stood on the shoulders of other people to get better. So
obviously, you know, you stand and you speak, you know, and you teach people, you know, a lot of information around, you know, sort of property and the benefits and the whys and the how, etc. And I think what I wanted to ask you, Pip, really was, what I find is that there's two things. One, what's your thoughts on, you know, people who want things for free? Does that make sense? And expect to get something from that? Does that make sense? A lot of people, you know, from their perspective, they want everything for nothing, right? So that's one mentality that I see out there, and I definitely see that in a lot of people who turn up to webinars, turn to this, and then they think they can do that. Does that make sense? So they think they want to have that education, which, again, as you know, as I know now, the education or the information is everywhere. It's all on the internet. It's if you want to go and find it, it'll be there and it will be free. Now, my real question here is, there's education, and then there's what I would call the most important part of it all, which is operational execution. Now, don't get me wrong, you've got to have the right education. You've got to then have the operational execution, and that's yourself doing it. And then you've obviously talked about the long-term support, which, again, we all need that in some form or another. But why do so many people fall at that hurdle? And when I say that hurdle of, yeah, I want to learn, I'm not willing to pay for it because, I don't know, I'm not going to say a joke. I was going to say a joke about, I won't say that. But I've got short arms and deep pockets, something like that. Let's use that one. I don't want to pay for it. Okay, that's fine. And then they come up short on the operational execution. What advice do you give to them? You know, yes, there's training, but that bridge, how do they solve that bridge from learning through to operational execution? Because that's the bit where I think most people fall down and stop or walk away from it.
Well, I mean, and I'll go in multiple directions, I think, on this. It's a great question because I hear it all the time. I see it with people's actions, and I've seen it forever with this. First of all, you're going to pay for your knowledge one way or another. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
And yes, YouTube University is free. There's no doubt about it. Every bit of information that's out there in the world, you can get it for free now. I'll tell a quick story. A good friend of mine, he's a little bit younger than me. He's told this story, so I'll attribute it to Sam, not my story. But it's funny, and it gets the point across. Because most all of us, and I don't care what country you're from, I don't care what your culture is, you've been taught to work hard by your mom and dad. They want you to work hard and find the value of a good, hard day's work.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I have a Depression era parents, meaning my parents lived through the Great Depression. Both my mom and dad have passed away, but my dad was born in 1921. If that gives you any perspective on time frames. Most of your grandparents were born in that area. My dad was born in that. And so every time I wanted to buy a candy bar when I was a young kid, I had to learn what happened in 1930. You know, I heard that every time. But my friend Sam, he said, you know, here's a story that kind of really points this out. He goes, I'm the most motivated guy in the world. And there's a lot of people that think with sheer hard work, you can get anything done. Okay. So here's a story that kind of, I think, spotlights that. Sam goes, he goes, I was a little kid. He said, I was motivated. I said to my mom, this would have been early 70s. I said to my mom, I said, Mom, I want to be the first guy on the moon. And his mom said, Sam, I'm sorry, but you know, we've already had somebody on the moon. And Sam's thinking, he's thinking. He says, okay, he goes, I'm motivated. What do I do? He goes, hey, Mom, I've got it figured out. I'm a problem solver. He goes, Mom, I'm going to be the first guy on the sun. And Sam's mom goes, well, honey, you know that's a ball of fire. If you go there, you're going to burn up. Sam goes, Mom, I'm a problem solver. He says, I'll go at night. And so the point being is you can try to solve every problem in the world, but you can be a motivated person, but you don't want to be a motivated idiot. Yeah. And so when you talk about operational execution, you can go get the information for free. It's out there everywhere. I call it YouTube University. But here's the problem. When you go to execute it, as Chris just said, who are you going to call with questions on YouTube University? If you ever see the chat rooms on the YouTube stuff, most of the people are just complaining about the person training. Most people don't know any more than you do.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking this website, but there's a website, and I don't even know, maybe it's international now. And maybe, Chris, you've heard of it, called Bigger Pockets in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they international too?
No, they're not international.
Okay.
No, they're US based pretty
I
much.
am not knocking Bigger Pockets whatsoever, but it's a free thing. You can go on there. There's no charge to be on there to start with. Obviously, as soon as you get involved, they want to sell you their books, their tapes, their whatever, their education. But it's free, and it's mostly a networking site for a lot of U.S. investors, where they just basically say, "Hey, I've got this problem. Do you have anybody who can help me solve it?" And the problem is, you just get a lot of unmotivated or uneducated people that are trying to help each other. So a lot of broke people trying to help a lot of other broke people. And that's a recipe for disaster. I always find it interesting, and I'm not knocking Bigger Pockets. Good for them. They created a mousetrap, and a lot of people want to eat their cheese. Good for them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it serves some purpose. There's a lot of that out there, of a lot of, and I shouldn't probably just talk about an industry, but I'm going to, is multi-level marketing businesses that are out there.
Yeah.
And Robert Kiyosaki likes to talk to those groups of people because many of them have good sales skills. And I think a lot of them teach good sales skills. So I'm not knocking them. But a lot of times, think about this. What do? They say, hey, here's a product. Go sell it to anybody you can. And who do you do? What do? You go out and you call every family member and every friend you ever have and say, I got this new idea. I got this new product. You got to buy it from me. And here's the problem. You're crappy at the pitch. And you're talking to the people that are probably going to tell you in the nicest way no. And you're not learning anything from that, because you need to have somebody who's really already done it, and that you can keep calling with questions. And unfortunately, a lot of broke people are talking to a lot of other broke people with those business ideas. And you're wasting a lot of time. And if you don't believe me that time it's way more important than money. The one thing that each one of us, the one asset that we're all given the same amount of every day, is 24 hours. And it's how you spend that 24 hours. If you're trying to, walk uphill all the time, you're going to go a lot slower than the guy that's got somebody with a motor, that has a motor that's going uphill. And a guy like Chris, myself, we have already been up there. We've got a motorized cart versus you trying to do it walking. You're not going to get there as fast. Is Chris perfect? Am I perfect? Heavens no. But we've got a lot of knowledge over the years that we've seen a lot of people who did it the wrong way are teaching us, hey, there's a better way to do it. So I think he collapsed the time frames. But I think the person that wants to do it on their own, they think they're going to just work it hard to make it happen. So you're going to pay for your knowledge through either hard work or the school of hard knocks. Go ahead, Chris.
Now, you differentiated, and again, I think for me, when we talk about time and money, to me, they're the same. So people talk about as though they're two different parameters. Now we speak to a lot of investors, we speak to a lot of agents on the ground, etc. And you talk about they again make that distinction as though they're separate. Now, here's the real factor: if you actually put your time, put a value in your time. So, for example, if you want to be on £25,000 a year, okay, £25,000 a year, that works out at about £12.50 an hour. Okay, so bearing in mind £12.50, that's including holidays, it's all that kind of stuff. So here's the real question: if you want to earn, and we put this to people, if you want to make yourself £25,000 a year, you're worth £12.50 an hour. And if you said to people, £12.50 an hour, that's what you're worth, I think people go, no, I'm worth way more than that. That's what a labourer would make on a building site. And they actually probably make more than that now, But the key thing is with this is if you do that, and suddenly you realise that you are paying for your time. So, for example, if you want to go and learn these things and it's going to go and take you 3 years or 4 years, this is just a time element. Never mind that you've got yourself into a predicament where you don't understand how to get out of a deal, or you don't understand the legal ramifications of not having an HMO license accurately in place, or you've got some breaches which is going to cost you £10,000 a fine. Even if you just did it simply on time, that's costing you a lot of money. A lot of money, and it just doesn't connect with people's heads. It doesn't.
I think a good analogy is with refurbishments or renovating, whatever word you want to call it. A lot of people, and I don't want to, put this as a guy thing, but it's a lot more of a guy thing than a girl thing, because a lot of guys like, I can go fix that. I can be a plumber. I can do the drywall. I can do all that stuff. I'm not saying you can't do it,
Yeah.
but if you pay a carpenter 30 pounds an hour, then you're saying, okay, that's what your time is worth.
Yeah.
If you go do it yourself, if you mow the lawn, if you paint, whatever jobs you think you can save money by doing yourself is actually costing you the time that you're never going to get that back.
Yeah.
So you ought to be focusing on the activities in property and real estate investing that are going to get you the highest rate of return. So your time is truly worth a certain amount. And if you can have somebody help you collapse the time frames through education, tools, and support, then now you, instead of having a 3-year time frame, now you brought that down to a 6-month or a 1-year time frame.
Yeah.
And the most important time to get your questions answered is at the very beginning, not through the school of hard knocks and, oh, I'll try to figure this out, because those mistakes could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars or pounds. And like I said, you're going to end up paying for it one way or another. Like I said, I've taught this a long time, old school mentality. And I don't know how many times I've had students come up to me and shake my hand and say, Pip, you know what? I wasted more money on that first deal because I screwed it up than it would have ever cost me to get trained the right way. And so you're going to pay for it one way or another, whether it's through time or the school of hard knocks, whatever it is. So you're going to pay for it. And so to me, it's just people being cheap. And here's the problem with it, Chris. It's passed on from generation to generation. My dad was cheap. I'll be the first to tell you that. His dad was cheap. And so it's ingrained in our psyche. I know when I've told people I did this, I did that. You did what? You spent what? And they just don't get it. But here's the problem. It becomes, if somebody says, I'm going to go be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to pay. Now, I'm assuming you have people that are not just in the UK on this webinar. In the UK and the US, we pay for all of our advanced education, meaning college, university. I know there are some countries that I've taught in that it's through your tax basis that you pay for your college or university education. But when you go to a school, and I don't care if you go to Harvard or Oxford or if you go to a community college or whatever it is, the point being is when you get that education, if most people say to their parents, hey, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get this education and it's going to cost me, and you put out whatever dollar amount you want, $10,000, 10,000 pounds, $40,000, 40,000 pounds, they're going to be, oh, you're going to be an accountant. That's a great investment of your money. And they have no problem with that, because I don't know what it is, and I don't know who the people are that have promoted this. The people that have promoted getting a good college education are revered and are like, oh, yes, you need to do that. And it's okay to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a college education to go get a job that pays you $40,000 or 40,000 pounds a year. To me, it doesn't make sense. You spend $40,000 on your education to get a $40,000 a year job. You know how often that happens in the United States? It happens millions of times every year, just because of a sheer volume of people we have in the United States.
Yeah.
And so, but people have no problem with that. And even your parents would be, that's okay, you can do that. But to get educated in a different manner through a non-traditional source, people are always leery of that. So I think there's a psyche of people out there that I don't want to pay for that kind of training, because that's not, an accredited university mentality. So I think there's a lot of that's ingrained in us.
So that leads me on to a really good question, which is, relating to that. We talked about what limits people, but you've seen so many people, thousands upon thousands and tens of thousands. What from what you've seen, what are the top fears or restrictions of people that want to change their lives through learning and then being able to execute? But what are the top fears that stop them moving forward? What are the limitations? What are the excuses? Is it, I haven't got money? I haven't, what are the objections that they have in themselves? Is it a lack of confidence that could be described as the overarching thing? What is it? And what do you help people get over? What are those objections?
I mean, obviously, one objection for anybody is lack of funding. And if
Yeah,
somebody's asking you to pay, and I don't care if it's $1,000 or $50,000, if you don't have the money, immediately your butt cheeks are just going to start to clench up because you go, oh, that's a
yeah,
lot of money. Okay. And I get that. But if there's ways to get that money from somebody else, whether it be through credit, through, an angel investor, lenders, whatever, personal loans, then you have to make the decision, can I get a return based on what I have to pay on interest on that money?
yeah,
And my opinion is many times over. But that's obviously the first question, and is a money question. I think the biggest issue that people have, and it comes kind of down to piggybacking on what I just said a minute ago, was the psyche of everybody else around them. Oh, Chris, you're crazy. Just do a safe job. Just do,
yeah,
a safe career, because that's going to get you to, whatever. And we saw in the last 3 months that that is just a total fallacy in the world. Just because when you have no control over the money coming in and you're working for earned income, and the only time you get paid is when you go trade some hours for it, those people got a rude awakening when a lot of those jobs just dried up and you had to stay home and you didn't get paid for it.
yeah,
When you have money coming in from investments, and we can talk about a million different ways to invest, but when you have cash flow coming in from those investments, you realize that you're educated more than even a lot of the other investors that are trying to do this business. Then you realize, hey, the money you spent, the effort that you put out was totally worth it, because everybody else was freaking out the last 60, 90 days. And they're going to
yeah,
continue to freak out for the next year or two, in my opinion, because of what's going to happen in the economy. There'll just be a lot of jobs lost and things like that. I think we've had, I believe the number is, and anybody can look at the statistics, it's over 30 million people apply for unemployment alone in the United States. That's like half the population of the UK, I think, if I'm not
yeah. We've
mistaken.
had. I think the number is up, and it surprised me quite high. I think it was 25% of people in employment are on furlough right now,
Yeah.
and to me that's staggering. I think there's a combination of that though, but I think there's a lot of companies who are gaming it, completely gaming it. But at the same time, irrespective of whether there's gaming or not, that's still a very, to me, outstandingly high number of people in an economy who are now being supported by the government. Basically, they're on the dole, as we call it.
Well, and there's a lot of politics that go into that, and I don't even want to get into that and talk about that. But the main thing I want you guys to do, and this is the half full glass, half empty glass mentality. If there's 20 or 25% unemployment, that means there's 80% employment.
Yeah,
I want to focus on those people that literally are still buying houses, that are still needing to pay rent. Even the 20% that's unemployed, or the 20% that's having issues, whatever, right now, and even the 80%, a lot of them are having issues too. It just,
yeah,
they're not a statistic yet. We can make money, and I'm not talking taking advantage. I'm talking of opportunities to help those people. They need, whether you have a job or not, you need a place to live.
yeah,
Whether you're underemployed or you got the job that you should have, you need a place to live. And if I can help provide that, there's always opportunities for me. And there's always going to be places that need to be fixed up. There's always going to be people that need to get a return on their money. And so I just always look at myself as an investor, as the middleman. If somebody's got money over here and somebody needs a place to live over there, how can I facilitate that and be
yeah,
the middleman and make money? But I think so. One of the fears that I you can never overcome, and I always I always call this the spousal or family objection. If you walk out of some place and your spouse or your family says you're crazy, you're nuts, there's a good chance that they're going to outsell me trying to tell you to change your life a little bit.
yeah,
It's so easy. And I have to admit, there's nothing. If somebody comes back to me and says, Pip, I'd love to do this, but my spouse just says she's going to divorce me or he's going to divorce me if I do it. Well, then you got a much bigger underlying problem than property investing or anything else in your life.
yeah,
I went to a class and I spent basically 17, and this is 2002. It's not adjusted for inflation. My brother and I spent $35,000 on education, so 17,500 each. And my spouse was not there. I went home and told her, "Hey, this is what I want to do. What do you want? What do you think?" And she said, "I support you either way." She said, "I know you make the right decision for our family." And I realized she took all the responsibility off of her shoulders and put it directly onto mine, which
yeah,
is, she's a smart woman, that Jennifer, way smarter than I'll ever be. And Chris already knows that. And so the point I want to make is, I think if you don't have a support mechanism in your with your family, I'm not telling anybody ever to get a divorce, but if your family's the one that's holding you back, and I'm talking mom, dad, brothers, sisters, people like that, unless they're paying for your daily expenses, if you're living at home and your parents are giving you a place to live, then you probably got to listen to them a certain amount. But if you're out on your own and you just call your dad out of the blue and say, hey, dad, what do you think of this? And your dad's never done that, there's a good chance he's going to tell you, no, don't do it. Person. And realize that somebody's not going to always, like what you do. I don't know that I know the definition of success because there's so many different definitions of it. But I do know the definition of failure, and that's trying to please everybody. Because every time you try to please everybody, you're going to fail because you're always going to disappoint someone. And so, and we can just look at religion and politics immediately like that and realize you're going to be on one side of every discussion there, depending on which direction you try to take. And so I think what you have to do is you have to basically just make that decision that, you know what, I'm going to change my life. And when you look at an investment, and I don't care if it's in yourself or if it's in a property, you can look at it the same way. What's my investment? What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's the upside? What's the downside? And I think the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, can I handle the worst case scenario? Yeah. So if you invest, I don't care if it's $1,000, $50,000 in yourself. If you can't handle losing $1,000 because you don't put the effort out, not because the person isn't helping you, because you're not putting the effort out. If you can't handle that, then don't ever get into any training of any kind. But if you realize, and I looked at it, and I said, I'm investing $17,500 of money I didn't have. I had to put it all on credit. But I said to myself, if this doesn't work, I'm going to figure out a way that I can pay that back. And that's what I did. And I think the biggest problem for a lot of people is it just doesn't hurt enough. They don't go big enough. And when it doesn't work immediately, they walk away from it. Like I said, I just last night was on a webinar, spent some money on some training. And I said to myself, if that guy would have asked me for $500, I probably would have said there's something wrong with it. Yeah. Because he's got to get a value for his time. And so, whatever number you put on something, you got to realize the person that's got the product has to get a return, or else they're not going to be in business very long. If somebody goes out and starts selling Lamborghinis for $10,000 or 10,000 pounds, but they've got 100,000 pounds invested in it, how long can they sell Lamborghinis? Not very long. They've got to make more than what they've got into it.
Not completely. It's a very, I think we can talk about this from experience, and I really wish, I say to a lot of people I meet and all the rest of it, or mentees or whatever, I wish I could plug in a USB and just download experience. Does that make sense? Of all the scenarios you've been through, I can teach you education, but it really, really comes down to you and yourself, your own motivation, your drive, and whether you want it. And I find that, and this leads me on to my next question. You've spoken at so many events, right? I think the biggest one was 3,000 people, was it?
6,000 people in Singapore. So that was interesting. Yeah.
So that was a big one. And I've even personally seen you where you've had a room of Australians, I think it was about 100, standing on their chairs chanting USA, which is probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And so, what are your thoughts on, as an individual versus group or tribe mentality? Whether it's individual or group or tribe, how does that affect people when they're making decisions on taking, a big leap in their life, or to buy something as we're describing, good education?
It's a great question because, and I'm going to answer it in a very specific way, because I think Americans, especially in some countries, we have a lot of preconceived notions of who we are as Americans, whatever that is, egotistical, loud, obnoxious in the rest of the world. Obviously, Americans all think Americans are the greatest, people that have ever walked the earth. And I get that. And so I'll never forget when I started going to do international presentations. I'd only done US and Canada. And so I had never done any international kind of stuff. And one of the guys that was, asking me to come over to these other countries and do it, he said, and I just want to let you know, everybody that's been doing this has been a UK guy, and they've gone to these other countries. And he goes, I think you may have a bigger hurdle to overcome since you're an American, because there's a different preconceived notion about Americans than people from the UK. And that's fine. You know, I can't change that. I don't know what people's perceptions are. And so I said to the guy, I said at the time, I said, you know what? I said, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I said, I'm going to get, and I had this happen not only in Australia, but I had it happen in New Zealand and in Singapore and in Denmark and in Sweden. And I had people, and I told the guy that before I went to the training, I said, here's my goal. I said, I'm going to have people standing on the chairs chanting USA, USA before the weekend is over. And he's like, there's no way in hell that you'll ever get that happening. And he used harder terminology than that, but that was what he, you know, and I say, and so here's the motivation that I used. If you tell me I can't do something, then I'm going to prove to you that I can.
Yeah.
And so I know, and part of it's being the youngest of 6 kids. You know, when you're the youngest person in your family, and especially a big family, and there's 16 years difference between my oldest brother and myself, so there's a lot of age gap there. I always felt like I had to prove myself. I think most people go into a job, any job, they go to school and they feel like they've got to prove themselves to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And and maybe it's a misguided, I got to please my parents, I got to please my boss, whatever it is. The only person you have to please at the end of the day is yourself. And unless somebody else is taking care of your monthly expenses, you got to take care of you and yourself. Now, obviously, if you have a spouse and kids, then you got to take care of that. If you have and maybe shouldn't even go here, but I will, you know, if you have a spiritual family you want to take care of, then you got to take care of that. Whatever it is you feel you got to take care of, that's fine. But that should be motivation enough. I think the toughest person to motivate is the young single person that has no responsibilities. Because, you know, what's their why? As soon as you have a spouse and kids, your why exponentially grows. And as soon as you have that, you got to feel like I'm not on this earth for myself. I'm on this earth for other people. I've married somebody. I've got kids. I've got to take care of these people. And so that to me should be motivation enough. If you're a spiritual person, if you're, you know, you're a person that wants to give to the community, maybe your why is bigger than just your spouse and kids. But at the end of it all, what you really have to, I think, understand is that you're doing this for you, and you have to make the best you can be. And so my motivation to have groups of students standing there yelling USA, and nobody wants, you know, no Aussie wants to yell that. No Danish person wants to yell that. But they're so motivated to make a change, and you've had that effect on them. They're like, I'll do anything for you, Pip.
Yeah.
And that makes you feel pretty good. And it's not even an egotistical thing. It's just that now I've got a responsibility. I've got to make sure that everything I've ever promised these people, that I'm going to be there to help them with. And if you can't, it's, you know, it's the two-way street there. If you can't get to that, then you're disappointing a lot, not just yourself, you're disappointing other groups of people. So with training in groups of people like that comes a huge responsibility. I think as an investor, as a person on the other side of it, as a customer, a student, it's good to see other people are doing this, but I think it also can be a downside. So whether you call it the herd or tribe mentality, that can have as much of a negative impact as it can have as a positive impact. When you're in a group of people that are great and they're positive, okay, they can build you up. But when you're in a group of people that are totally negative, they can drag you down. And so I've seen it go both ways. And I just truly believe that you have to be your own person to make your own decisions. I've been in rooms where the vibe was really negative, and the people that wanted to make a change were getting drugged down by the people that didn't want to make a change. Yeah. I've been in other rooms where the vibe was really positive, that the negative people got brought up then at the end of it. And so it's really cool to see, you know, I think from a trainer's, teacher's, whatever speaker standpoint, that tribe mentality, that herd mentality in both directions. But I think when it's all said and done, you have to make your own decisions to make your own changes. So if you have a big enough reason why, and it could be very simple. It could be that I want to get out of my job. It could be that I want more money for retirement. It could be that I want to make sure that my spouse doesn't have to work as hard. It could be I want to make sure that my parents don't have to go to a nursing home.
Yeah.
It could be that I want to put my kids through the nicest university or get them into a private, you know, school right now. So it could be a million different reasons. Heck, it could be you want to drive a nicer car. I mean,
we had this the other day, Pip. You know, you're talking about the why, and it's something that I think people talk about this. I've seen it, other speakers, I've seen other people, and they talk about it as though it's just like a 5-minute thing. It's like a throwaway comment. Go and get yourself a why. It really isn't. And we had a really good webinar with one of my team who's called Bonnie, and Bonnie very much deals with sort of life coaching, etc. And these things, you know, take a while to actually. She says, no, the why has to be something that's bigger than you. It's bigger. It's bigger than anything materialistic. It's actually what's going to get you up when you're, what's the word, feeling the pain, when you're you know, not feeling it, you're not in a positive environment. What still gets you up in that morning? Is that bigger why? Because, you know, I am doing it so my kids can go and have choice. Does that make sense in their life? You know, it has to be bigger than you as an individual, because it's too easy to what's the word? Make it materialistic, but that really doesn't mean anything to us inside. You know, it really doesn't. Because if you are satisfied with yourself, you understand that actually materialism doesn't really matter. So when you know, this is why you've got your Warren Buffetts. This is why you've got all of these top guys who have now got to the point where they've got so much that they're just giving it all away because of that. It doesn't really bring that internal peace or that sense of fulfillment unless you're doing it for something bigger than you.
I heard a guy, and I wish I remember the name, and he probably wasn't even his quote. He probably stole it from somebody else. What do they say? If you're stealing from me, you're stealing twice because I stole it from somebody else mentality. I mean, I love it when I work with a bunch of people from the UK, because I'd see a quote and it'd be attributed to Richard Branson or Winston Churchill. And if you come across the pond here to the UK or the US, the same quotes are attributed to Abraham Lincoln or, you know, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So I don't know who does these quotes and who they get attributed to, but the point being is, I heard this, and it's very similar to what the person Bonnie that you talked about, and I heard it said this way. It said, if your why doesn't make you cry, then it isn't big enough.
Yeah.
I mean, if you bought a nice car and you lost it, maybe you'd cry if you lost the car. I don't know. But if you have a kid, if you have a parent and they're no longer there and you didn't do the best you could for them, that's going to make you cry.
Yeah.
And so I think the only thing that I can even justify to that thinking is that, you know, when you lose somebody special, did you tell them everything? Did you do everything you possibly could to help them have a better life?
Yeah.
And that's one thing you can, you know, make sure that you've done. And that's a why. It's not the car. It's not this. You know, maybe it might be helping them get a nicer car. Maybe it might be helping them get something that they never thought they could get in life. I mean, I know my wife made the comment, and it was, and she talks way better about this stuff than I do. But she goes, I grew up and I never dreamed that I could be a stay-at-home mom. She says, I never dreamed that would be in my. She's, because, you know, her mom worked, her grandma, you know, try to. And that's that psyche, or that, you know, it comes down from generation to generation. You can pass on generational wealth like Warren Buffett, or you can pass on generational poverty mentality. And your kids see what you do. They don't always listen to what you say, but they always see what you do. And you can sit there all day long and say you love your job, but if you're gone and you're not around and being able to help, you know, your kids when they need it, or at their games, or, you know, their music events or whatever, then you're voting with your feet. And
and they're smart, and kids are smart because they don't. And I always think that we as adults become quite dumb because we think that people listen to our words, when in actual fact we don't. If we go back to our kid self, and kids see for you who you are, and I think even if I relate it to, you know, something like even something that works on instinct, like a dog knows you, and kids know you. And even if you're there as a parent or whatever, and you'll say, do this, they know if it's real or not. Do you know what I mean? And so if you're, you know, running around, you're anxious, you're not really there. Does that make sense? Yet you're saying it's all good. They see you for what you really are. And I think people in you know, when they're at events, you've got to go, and they're seeing people and they're telling them they're going to give them the world and all the rest of it. You've got to go with your gut. And people, I think, unfortunately these days, don't listen to themselves when they should, more so, because there's so much noise, you know, there's so much inbound, there's so many options, you know, et cetera, when in actual fact what it really comes down to is your own internal compass. And what feeling do you get from that? If somebody's being genuine, you can feel that. It's not about what they're saying. You can feel that, whether they're genuine or not. So I've got a really good thing to sort of ask you, which goes from, we've talked about, the absolute necessity for, having your why, having some really good, education, but then obviously bridging that gap with support into the operational execution of whatever you want to go do, and then having that support after. But when we talk about the word successful, you've touched on it. I think people get caught up in this, on what it means. And when I say successful, that people have got to say, what does that mean to them? Because what that means to me may be very different from what that means to you, Pip. And it may mean very different between, we've had this discussion before, somebody who is, I don't know, a teacher, their definition of success will be to replace their income, and that may be 4 or 5 properties, something like that. The definition of somebody who is already an investment banker, the definition of success may be in relative terms the same, but to everybody else, it's so much bigger and better, and he wants, 50 million of properties or whatever it may be. But in actual fact, that relativity is actually the same success. But that's fine, and you can look through that. But why do people, and I don't know, this is a human nature thing, so I'm asking you as Mr. Human Nature and understanding, meeting loads of people, is when people are successful, why don't they really talk about it to other people? Why don't they really, get others on that journey? Why are we so, now just immediately go for, I'm quick to moan, I'm quick to point fingers, I'm quick to call out problems, and blame others. But the other side of the coin, nobody really talks about the success, or this guy did a good deed for me, you should check it out. Why is that negatively, in my opinion, more so in the world, and want to jump to conclusions and point fingers and nail people rather than actually the positive side of it? Why?
I don't know if I know why. You observe things, and there's a lot of old sayings. Is bad news travels a lot quicker than good news. Misery loves company, and I think that is that you talk about the herd mentality, and and whether you talk about it from financial standpoint or number of properties or whatever it may be, everybody has a different definition of success. I think, and this is just an opinion, and we'll take whatever that's worth here. I think, and I know I'm not a guy that likes to brag about what I've got, what I've done, anything like that. And I know, and a lot of it's the way I was brought up. I don't want to be real flashy with anything, and that's just me. But being flashy is different than telling somebody, hey, I did this and this is how I did it. Let me show you.
Correct.
And I think that's who I want to be. I mean, I've seen so many people that they do some great deals. They made some good money, and the first thing they're doing is buying the most expensive car out there. And they've got a $50,000 watch. I don't even own a watch. My wife will tell me, your cell phone has a clock on it. You really don't need a watch. I'm not a watch guy. I've stood on stages with people who were very successful and very, very good, and I've stood on stages with people who just thought they were pretty good, and they thought they had to wear a $50,000 watch to impress people. My opinion of that is the only person they're impressing is themselves and their own egotistical mentality. If I brought a $50,000 watch home, even if it was for my wife, she'd send me back to the store and she'd say, how many people can we help out with that $50,000? So a lot of it, I think, is upbringing. A lot of it is who you want to be. And even if you're brought up in a bad way, it doesn't mean you can't change. It's a matter of always giving back. And I think a decision I made a long time ago was the difference between being successful and being significant. Successful happens while you're on this earth. Maybe you've been a good teacher. Maybe you've been a good student. Maybe you've been a good parent, a good grandparent. Those are all successful things. Maybe you made a lot of money at your job. You're successful. That's great. Significance is the clues or the trail that you leave after you're off this earth. Yeah. So I always feel if I can be significant, nobody's going to care if Pip had a $50,000 watch. but they're going to care if I kept answering their questions, whether it was a year ago that I met them, 10 years ago, if I helped them get a property. I'll never forget, Chris, and I don't know if I've ever told you this story or not, but back when I was mentoring years ago, Kiyosaki has these games called Cash Flow and Cash Flow for Kids.
Yeah.
And the students that I were mentoring were the exact same age that I was. And Ron and Nancy are their names. And they had 11 and 13, no, at the time they were 9 or 11 and 9-year-old kids. They're older, much older now. But I said to Ron and Nancy, I said, do your kids like games? They're like, yeah. Like, so, okay, I'm gonna bring a game with me. And they go, what game you bring? I said, Cash Flow for Kids. And Ron and Nancy go, well, we got the adult version. I said, well, let's do this. Let's take one of the nights after I get done mentoring. We'll have your kids at the table, and then we'll play Cash Flow for Kids. And so that's what we did on the first evening of the mentorship. The kids were they're like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. He's sitting there playing this game and teaching this game with us. Well, the next night, Ron and Nancy invited some friends over, other investors, and we had kind of just a mastermind session. But then we played the adult version of Cash Flow, and the kids stayed up, and they were just begging their mom. It was like midnight, 1 o'clock, and the kids were begging mom and dad, "Can we stay up? Can we stay up?" And of course, how can mom and dad say no? Because the kids were just learning loads of information. And Ron and Nancy say to this day, their kids still talk about that. I'm going to be significant in their life by playing a game with them. That's it. They're going to remember that weird guy with the weird name. I may not even remember my name, but they're going to remember I played that game with them until 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was life-changing to them. Was it a financial thing? No, but it's going to be a memory. And so you can create memories for people that are going to way outlast any financial stuff you give them. Now, don't get me wrong. You need money to do a lot of things in this world, and you need money to make some of those memories sometimes. Whatever it is, those things you want to do, if it's a trip you want to take. And so having the financial ability to do those things is great, but you want the memory from it, not so much just the financial side of it. So I think, it comes back to, if your why makes you cry, then obviously it's probably big enough. But if your why is just the financial something or other, some type of thing, is probably, I get this, you go buy something really nice and the newness wears off pretty quick.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. It's
even as adults,
process of the thought of getting it, which is more exciting. And I explain this to a lot of people. And I know you're a good boy. You don't like to swear, Pip, but unfortunately, I do swear occasionally, just to put a bit of emphasis on. But when you have your internal goals and your mechanisms to what you deem as successful and achieving, I mean, I remember, doing my first property all by myself. I was, you're told to do, buy to lets to start with, right? Start small and build it up into the pyramid. And we all know that. Well, I steamed in with a, 4-story property, commercial in the bottom, 4-bedroom flat above, and turned it into a 7-bedroom, 7-ensuite, right? That was my first, and that was in 2008. So this was at a time when, the world's going, and I'm doing that. And funny enough, you then achieve it. And you know what? Nobody else gives a shit. You expect fireworks, people to be high-fiving your ass. Do you know what I mean? Look at me, I'm a good boy. Look at this cash flow. It's now going to bring in £36,000 a year, which is just, more than my salary that I was when I was working at Intel Corporation. And you turn around and you're going, nobody cares. Nobody cares about what you do apart from you. And so, it's one of these things that I think, yes, it's about achieving. Yes, it's about striving to hit goals and so all the rest of it. Don't expect you to suddenly have this overwhelming satisfactional feeling when you achieve, because nobody else cares. And it's a real hard thing you need other goals and then you realign them and stuff like that. But don't look for external, comfort from people. Actually, most people actually, when you do something like that, will probably actually turn around and go, "You prick, I'm jealous." So
there's an interesting quote, and I know I'll mess it up, but I can't remember it. But 10% of the people, don't care about your problems. The other 90% are glad you have the problems.
Yeah.
And that's that herd mentality of the misery loves company. And so, nobody cares about you more than you do.
Yeah.
And you've gotta have that motivation, and nobody can give you that drive. It's got to be the why of whatever it is that you have in life that makes you want to get up and do things when you don't want to get up and do those things. When you
Yeah.
don't want to make that phone call, or you're scared to make that ad because what if somebody calls? What do I say? Oh my gosh, it actually worked. I advertised and somebody called me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. And I'm noticing how quickly the world is moving today. And I'll advertise, and you get this coming, that coming, but then there's other people that are way bigger than me that are advertising, and as soon as somebody clicks on the advertisement, they're getting a response from that competitor of mine because they've got other systems in place that are better than me. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean mine don't still work. I just realize that things are moving so quickly, but I still got to be in the game, and I'm
Yeah.
going to be in the game no matter what. And the only way you can ever win the game is to be in the game, and that's you're always going to have somebody taller, stronger, faster, bigger than you, but you got to get in the game.
And and even going that a little bit further, even from an athletic or sports perspective, you've got Usain Bolt, who dominated for 12 years. It's going to end. There's somebody newer, and that you're going to get. You know what I mean? It always will come to an end, and so we strive for this, this unobtainable, thing that we put pressure on ourselves. But in actual fact, that's only an internal thing. So you just sort of focus on yourself. Know what drives you, know what you're striving to give yourself that comfort. That's have I satisfied what I've wanted to do, because nobody else cares really. And so if you're not happy with yourself, you're never going to be happy, so it's definitely one of those things. But Pip, what I was going to do, and you didn't know this is coming, this is always a good thing that we do here at SI. So we're going to do 60 seconds quick fire questions, because we've talked a lot, but at the same time, it doesn't really get to know you or your little habits or whatever it may be. So we've got some nice questions. Do you know what I mean? Which we're going to put it on. But I'm pointing out to everybody that Pip doesn't know this is coming. So this is fine. So we'll have 60 seconds. Is that all right? You okay with that?
Well, I have no idea what we're doing, but I'm sure it will be fun. Are you going to have stuff up on the screen, or are you just asking me stuff?
No, I'm gonna put you on the screen. I'm gonna watch your reaction, because there's some fun stuff in here, right? So you're gonna enjoy this, all right? So we'll do it.
I need my glasses to read stuff on the screen?
No, as long as you can hear me. So
okay, I just want to make sure because I don't want to miss 20 seconds trying to get my glasses to read.
No, you just listen to me. This would be great. Right, so 60 seconds on the clock with Pip Stehlik. Here we go. So, cake or pie?
Cake.
Rock, paper, or scissors?
Scissors.
What type of milk do you put on your cereal?
Skim.
Who's your favorite Harry Potter character?
Must be Harry, because I've never seen any of them.
Oh no! I can't believe that. Are you a morning or a night person?
Morning.
How do you like your steak cooked?
Medium rare.
What's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning?
Go to the bathroom. I'm 52.
Dogs or cats?
Neither, but we have 3 cats. So there you go.
How many books have you read so far this year?
4 or 5? 5, I think.
Favorite movie of all time?
Oh my. This is I don't know. Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Love. What color is your toothbrush?
Orange.
What's the one thing that annoys you the most?
Stupid questions. No. People that think they know it all, and egotistical people. Those 2 things bother me a lot.
Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world, or be able to talk to animals?
Every language in the world.
And the final question, what would you do if you didn't have to work tomorrow?
Spend time with my wife and kids.
There we go. Good job. There we go. You didn't know that was coming.
Why was the toughest question my favorite movie? Because I think it's probably because I like so many movies. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it. I would have never said Forrest Gump, but I was flipping through the TV and it's on all the time. And I'm like, why is that movie on? So I think that's why I put it.
Hey, we've got that recorded, so that's Pip's favorite movie forever now. It's legit.
No, I don't think it is, but that's one we're going to go with.
Buddy, I can't put out my appreciation enough for you spending some time. I love speaking with you and all the rest of it. But I'm sure everybody else, when they watch this live now, that we've had a lot of people watching and then watching again when we do. But as always, I just superly appreciate it, and I know that our paths are going to cross time and time again. But thank you so much, buddy, and. I'll do it from my side of this side of the pond, and hopefully when we come over and launch SI over there, we'll be dancing a little bit closer together. Good people.
Well, maybe we can shake hands the next time we see each other.
You know it, man. But make sure you've got your hands clean. All right.
I'll have the hand sanitizer. We'll be good to go.
But thank you so much, man. Big love to the family, etc. But take care.
Great talking to you. Have a good one.
All right, man. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.